Thank you, Steve, for that kind introduction. Many of you may well not be familiar with the Cobden Centre. It's an Austrian School of Economics think tank founded by Member of Parliament Steve Baker here. And we've become very interested in digital currencies over the last couple of years. So, we've heard over the last 24 hours that there's something deeply wrong with our current monetary system. We've heard about many of the distortions caused around the world and also some of the possible solutions. I'm going to start today with a quote from Ronald Reagan from the 1980 presidential campaign. He said, "This is the issue of this election, whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves." I think most of us here today broadly believe in free markets, and we shouldn't forget how far we've come since the 1970s, where there was widespread wage and price controls in the US, and in the UK, we even had the government owning and running telecoms companies and removal firms. But we still have one area where prices and supply are fixed by a little intellectual elite, and that is money. Money makes up half of every transaction over your lifetime, and therefore monopoly power in this area should be up for discussion just like any other area. So the solution I'm going to talk about today has three advantages. First, it can be applied straight away and does not require a political solution. Second, it can evolve over time, recognizing that none of us have all the answers. And third, it can incorporate many of the ideas that have been spoken about at this conference, including currency being backed by gold. So what I'm going to speak about today is currency freedom. That is the formal legitimizing of private digital currencies such as Bitcoin. Most of you here today will have heard of Bitcoin, but you may not be aware of the underlying technology and its ramifications. There's currently huge interest in this technology, both in Silicon Valley and from entrepreneurs around the world. Bill Gates called Bitcoin a technical tour de force. Richard Branson said it will transform the way we do business. Peter Thiel said it has the potential to change the world, while BNP Paribas, the largest bank in France, said of the technology underlying Bitcoin that it should be considered as an invention like the steam or combustion engine that has the potential to transform the world of finance and beyond. Finally, John McAfee, the founder of McAfee Computer Security, said it will be everywhere and the world will have to readjust. World governments will have to readjust. So what is it that's so revolutionary about Bitcoin and these new technologies? Bitcoin needed to solve several problems. Principally, it needed to maintain the integrity of a decentralized, distributed payment system. In other words, it needed to prevent double spending, theft, and fraud without having a central caretaker for the payment network. Satoshi Nakamoto, the pseudonymous creator of Bitcoin, solved this by using a distributed ledger known as the blockchain. This is a public ledger that anybody can download, and once downloaded, you can view every single Bitcoin transaction that has ever occurred. This distributed ledger is maintained and the transactions are verified by the computing power of the network. The computers who maintain the Bitcoin network and verify the transactions are then paid in newly created Bitcoin. This is what's known as Bitcoin mining. There are few precedents in financial history for something this revolutionary. In 1494, Luca Pacioli wrote the first paper on double-entry bookkeeping. Pacioli is often called the father of accounting and also taught mathematics to Leonardo da Vinci. These modern accounting methods were the enzyme for the rise of the Italian banking dynasties such as the Medici. The 17th and 18th centuries saw the rise of the first corporations and stock markets in Amsterdam and London. What stock markets were to the first great age of globalization, the blockchain may well be to the second great age of globalization, that is, the internet age. With blockchain technology, money becomes something materially different. The money itself becomes programmable. For instance, contracts can be programmed into the transaction on the blockchain, meaning that payment only occurs when the other side of the contract has been fulfilled. What else can this technology be used for? Some examples include stocks and bonds, the registering and trade of intellectual property, and networks of smart contracts. The Nasdaq Stock Exchange is now using blockchain technology for its pre-IPO trading. Deutsche Bank recently issued a paper on how the blockchain could be used for securities issuance and transfer, clearing and settlement, and enforcing derivatives contracts. IBM and Samsung recently issued a joint paper on how in the future your fridge could be on the blockchain buying your food for you using digital currencies. In the words of one of the top finance people at IBM, on the blockchain, nobody knows you're a fridge. Both the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve are talking about issuing their own cryptocurrencies. A Fed coin would mean that people could transact with each other, peer-to-peer, without the need for using banks as intermediaries. In our current financial system, banks serve as the ledger for the economy. They serve as a ledger for how much money we have. Central banks then serve as a ledger for those banks and how much reserves they have. With blockchain technology, this entire ledger system can become distributed and peer-to-peer. You may have heard of some of the discussions over the last few months of the various merits and demerits of Bitcoin versus a gold standard. Once you understand that essentially the underlying technology of Bitcoin is a ledger system, you can appreciate that there's nothing to stop gold being used as the unit of account for that ledger system. In other words, a gold-backed Bitcoin. And in fact, there's already some companies that are doing this at the moment. I think in another 10 to 15 years, we will look back at our current financial system and marvel at how primitive it was. An international wire transfer currently takes several days and costs upward of $50. I recently, for my business, needed to take payment by check from an American customer. I run a business in Britain. So I went to Lloyd's, my bank, and asked how long the clearing would take. They said, because it's an international transfer, clearing can take 4 to 5 weeks for the check. To put this into perspective, the SS Royal William, the first steamship to cross the Atlantic in 1831, took 25 days. So what do we need to do for this technology to flourish and reach its potential? The key thing will be resisting regulation. We now see the bit license in New York State. Compliance costs for this have been estimated to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. When you think about some of the creative companies over the last few years, like Facebook and Google, which were founded in people's bedrooms, Just bear in mind, would they have started if the founders had had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in compliance fees before they even got going? The success rate for regulators in dealing with new technology historically has not exactly been exemplary. In the late 19th century, we saw the first laws for the automobile, or the horseless carriage, as it was then known. These were euphemistically known as the red flag laws. In Britain, anybody with a horseless carriage had to have somebody walking 60 yards ahead, carrying a red flag, warning people about the approaching horseless carriage at all times. Pennsylvania went one step further, where anybody with a horseless carriage, upon chance encounters with cattle or livestock, by law, had to, quote, immediately and as rapidly as possible, disassemble the automobile and conceal the various components out of sight behind nearby bushes until equestrian or livestock is sufficiently pacified. In the UK, the red flag laws were repealed in 1896. Lord Winchelsea symbolically ripped a red flag in half in front of Parliament, and fans of the new horseless carriage drove from London to Brighton to celebrate. But in many states in the US, and in many countries around the world, the damage had already been done by over-regulation, and those places would never see the automobile industry flourish. We should bear this in mind, since there's recently been a senator calling for the complete ban of Bitcoin because it's, quote, too disruptive for the economy. Bitcoin and blockchain-based digital technologies in general are not just currencies with no central bank, just as the internal combustion engine was not just a horseless carriage. Blockchain technology is something radically innovative with the potential to revolutionize commerce. So what does this mean for our current political and monetary system? In the 1990s, peer-to-peer file sharing challenged the copyright industry. Peer-to-peer, at that point, could have been absorbed into the formal economy, but the copyright industry decided to take them on head-on. Like the Lernaean Hydra, every time they cut off a head, two more would appear in its place. Blockchain technology will present a similar fundamental challenge to the financial industry as peer-to-peer did for copyright.
What is peer-to-peer?
That is, people can share music and things over the internet instead of paying for it.
Napster.
Yeah, that's right, Napster, that's all. So, our entire economic model is currently based around the idea that central banks contain the business cycle through the central planning of money and credit. Macroeconomic students around the world are taught ISLM models, dynamic stochastic general equilibrium, and vector autoregressive models. Central bankers view the economy as essentially a thermodynamic system, whereby pushing and pulling the right levers at the right time, they can cause the economy to achieve escape velocity. Digital currencies will present a direct challenge to all of this. In Europe, we now have several countries that have negative nominal interest rates. That is, we have finally reached the reductio ad absurdum of modern monetary economics. Digital currencies will make this all but impossible. In 1974, Friedrich von Hayek won the Nobel Prize in Economics for his exposition of how the manipulation of credit and interest rates distorts the economy and generates the boom-bust cycle. He also wrote several papers on how private currencies and allowing people to choose what they want as money will be the only long-term solution to this. What we are seeing now is the first truly free market in money that we have seen for hundreds of years. There are now several hundred digital currencies. Some of my favorites that I heard about recently are grid coin, where you can earn coins by donating your computing power from your personal computer to be used for scientific research at the University of California at Berkeley. That's research in medicine, physics, and mathematics. Similarly, with Cure Coin, you earn your coins by donating computing power to Stanford University's Folding at Home program, which studies protein folding using supercomputers.
Are you for that stuff?
I'm for a free market of money, so if people want to do that, good for them.
Bad money, though.
Well, bear in mind that...
Bad money if you try to incorporate some other purpose in the money creation system. That's a fundamental mistake that all those...
We have a speaker. Speak your mind, George.
Well, bear in mind that the Bitcoin network now has 100 times more computation than all of the Google servers combined. We are currently approaching the denouement of our current financial and monetary system. We have an $80 trillion global bond bubble. During the period of so-called deleveraging from 2007, the world economy has added $57 trillion of new debt, which now stands at more than $200 trillion. Just as our current system is bursting at the seams with artificially cheap credit, we are now seeing the rise of a new embryonic system coming from digital currencies and blockchain technology. This new monetary system is one that is not controlled by powerful people, but by all of us. One that does not transfer wealth from the real economy to the financial sector, but in fact minimizes the financial sector. One that does not control who we can trade with, but frees us to trade with whom we please. For all of us here who believe in freedom and free markets, the most important battleground right now is the battle for currency freedom. Thank you.